I'm Rachel Monroe, a 45-year-old senior accountant living in Seattle, Washington. For most of my adult life, I've been the steady one, the planner, the peacekeeper, the provider. But none of that preparation could have readied me for the moment my husband made that call. I was sitting at my kitchen table, enjoying my morning coffee while rain drummed against the window. When I saw Eric's name flash on my phone screen, I hesitated. He was supposed to be on a golf retreat with his college friends in Arizona. "Hey babe," his voice carried an unnaturally casual tone. "Just calling to let you know I've moved your inheritance into my name. Time to start fresh with someone younger who actually appreciates what I bring to the table." The world around me seemed to freeze. Behind his voice, I could distinctly hear ocean waves crashing and feminine laughter echoing in the distance. That arrogant chuckle that once seemed charming now made my blood run cold. "You really should have been more careful with your account details, sweetheart," he added with obvious satisfaction. My hand remained steady. My voice didn't waver. I simply stared at the raindrops racing down the glass and whispered, "You're absolutely right. You deserve every bit of it." The call ended. What Eric never suspected was that he had just stepped directly into an elaborate trap, one carefully constructed years ago by someone far more cautious and strategic than he could ever imagine. I had been following that blueprint to perfection, and I'd been waiting for exactly this moment. Responsibility found me early in life. While my friends were dancing at fraternity parties or taking spontaneous road trips during college, I was buried deep in spreadsheets and accounting textbooks. I chose this field because numbers provided absolute certainty in an uncertain world. They couldn't lie, couldn't cheat, couldn't suddenly change the rules on you. People, however, were an entirely different story. I met Eric Monroe during my final semester at the University of Washington. He possessed this magnetic energy, full of bold ideas about real estate ventures and creating a business empire. He spoke all the right words, made me laugh until my sides hurt, and somehow made me feel truly seen for the first time. Back then, I genuinely believed in the power of shared dreams and ambitions. I believed in us. We married a year after graduation. I successfully passed my CPA examination, secured a stable position, and took complete control of managing our household finances. Eric pursued his entrepreneurial dreams with relentless enthusiasm. His first venture was a construction startup that crumbled within 12 months. Next came a restaurant investment with a renowned chef who vanished halfway through the launch. Then the cryptocurrency obsession hit, which cost us our planned European vacation and wiped out most of our emergency savings. Each failure followed the same predictable pattern. Eric would bounce back with renewed optimism and another brilliant idea while I quietly worked behind the scenes to repair the financial damage. I refinanced our mortgage when necessary, consolidated mounting credit card debt, and painstakingly rebuilt our savings account. Eric always recovered with his next big scheme, and I kept hoping that eventually, one of them would actually succeed. He interpreted my silence as complete submission. What he failed to understand was that I was playing a much longer game. To the outside world, we appeared perfectly stable with our comfortable home, decent cars, and annual vacations. But I maintained a detailed mental record of everything. I always knew exactly how much risk we were carrying and where every dollar was allocated. I stopped believing in his promises somewhere around year 15 of our marriage, but I never voiced my doubts. There seemed to be no point in arguing. I stayed because I believed that's what genuine commitment required of me. Then Uncle Henry died suddenly from a massive heart attack. It was unexpected but not entirely shocking given his lifestyle. He was the only real family I had left in this world. While I was still processing my grief, his attorney handed me a folder that would completely change the trajectory of my entire life. Inside was documentation for a trust inheritance worth $600,000 and a beautiful lakeside cabin in Vermont. I shared minimal information with Eric, mentioning only that Henry had left me a little something. What I deliberately didn't reveal was that Henry had also left me detailed instructions, a comprehensive blueprint, and a serious warning about protecting what was now mine. Uncle Henry was a quiet man, but he was never passive or naive. He built his fortune not once, but twice in his lifetime. The first time was in his 30s through a real estate partnership that turned catastrophically sour. The second time was in his 50s after clawing his way back with lessons that had been brutally hard-earned through experience. He used to tell me, "Rachel, money isn't just about mathematical calculations. It's about protection, about knowing who might come for it when you're most vulnerable and least prepared. As a child, I didn't grasp the significance of his words. As a young woman, I thought he was being unnecessarily paranoid. But as I sat across from his attorney, a sharp woman named Miriam Clark, everything finally started making perfect sense. Henry was extraordinarily methodical about everything, Miriam explained, sliding the trust documents across the polished table. He structured every aspect to ensure that absolutely no one, not a spouse, not a sibling, not even a biological child, could access what was specifically meant for you. He also made sure you had all the necessary tools to maintain that protection. Indefinitely, the trust was managed through Morgan Gray, a private wealth management firm that specialized in asset protection for high-risk clients. There were multiple layers of authorization protocols, sophisticated fraud detection systems, and security clauses that required my personal signature 3 separate times. Henry's letter, enclosed carefully in the folder, was brief but incredibly powerful. If someone ever attempts to take this from you, don't react with anger or emotion. React with careful preparation and strategic thinking. Trust can be broken in a single moment, but protection must be built long before it's ever needed. I followed every instruction precisely. Eric had no knowledge that the trust even existed. I told him Henry had left a modest amount, just enough to cover our roof repairs and maybe a couple of nice vacations. I kept a small portion in our joint account to maintain this narrative convincingly. The rest remained completely untouched, safely locked away, earning steady interest. Initially, I felt guilty about hiding such a significant amount from my husband, but that uncomfortable feeling faded quickly the moment Eric began making subtle inquiries about the inheritance. Where exactly was it being held? Did I need his assistance with organizing the paperwork? Wouldn't it be much more efficient if we simply combined all our financial resources? I smiled pleasantly, nodded agreeably, and told him I would certainly think about his suggestions. But internally, I felt something fundamental shift inside me. It wasn't fear or suspicion exactly, but a state of complete readiness. Henry hadn't just left me money. He had provided me with a financial fortress and taught me exactly how to defend it. Eric's critical mistake wasn't that he attempted to steal from me. His mistake was assuming I wouldn't notice or wouldn't be prepared. The day he called from that beachside resort, I was already logged into the banking portal, reviewing our monthly statements with increased frequency, something I'd been doing more regularly over the past several months. When he claimed he had moved the inheritance into his name, I knew exactly what he was referring to. He had attempted to access the small joint account I had deliberately seeded with just a fraction of the inheritance money, precisely enough to maintain appearances and support my cover story. That particular account was being monitored constantly, protected by multiple security measures, and strategically baited for exactly this scenario. Morgan Gray had established automatic alerts for any unauthorized access attempts. The moment Eric initiated the transfer request, the entire system immediately froze the account and flagged the action as potential fraud. Within 30 minutes, I received a discreet but urgent call from Patricia Wells, my dedicated account manager at the firm. Miss Monroe, we've detected a flagged transaction attempt on your secondary account. A male caller provided partial information but completely failed to pass all required verification protocols. As per your specific authorization, all associated assets are now locked down. My response was immediate and decisive. Yes, proceed with the lockdown. Then I simply waited for the inevitable. Eric called again later that same night. I deliberately didn't answer, letting the phone ring until it went to voicemail. Let him experience the discomfort of silence. Let that absence of response speak, louder than any words possibly could. When I finally picked up the following morning, his voice was shaking with barely controlled panic. Rachel, what's going on? I tried to transfer the money yesterday, and now the bank is claiming everything is under federal investigation. They've completely frozen the accounts. I took a slow, deliberate sip of my coffee. Good morning to you too, Eric. How's the weather treating you in Arizona? Stop playing games with me. What did you do? I didn't do anything at all, sweetheart. You did. Attempted unauthorized transfer of funds from a federally protected trust tends to raise quite a few eyebrows in the banking industry. A long, uncomfortable pause. You can't be serious about this. I'm your husband. I have legal rights to these assets. No, I said with gentle firmness. You absolutely don't. Not to inherited assets that are protected under federal law, especially not ones that have been placed in a discretionary trust, and most especially not after you've attempted to access them through fraudulent means. Eric sputtered, argued, and made increasingly desperate excuses. I let him exhaust himself completely before delivering the final devastating blow. The trust includes a specific clause, Eric. Anyone who attempts unauthorized access automatically forfeits all claims to any marital assets. You didn't just break my trust. You activated a legal firestorm, and every single action is now on official record. The silence that followed was thick with pure panic. I ended the call and allowed myself a small smile. Eric thought he was the clever predator in this situation, but he was actually the one who had been caught in the carefully constructed snare. Eric had always severely underestimated me. He saw my silence as weakness, my patience as complacency, but I had been quietly preparing for this exact scenario for months. The moment he began asking too many probing questions about passwords, inheritance details, and even suggesting he should help with our household budgeting, I knew something was definitely coming. 3 weeks before his fateful call, I deliberately left a fabricated bank statement on my desk showing false account balances and incorrect routing numbers. I watched him carefully, observing his reflection in my computer screen as he quickly photographed the document with his phone when he thought I wasn't looking. The next day, I confirmed with Patricia that absolutely no security breaches had occurred in the real trust account. We knew exactly where he would attempt to strike. We just had to be patient and let him make his move. After his attempted theft triggered the complete system lockdown, I opened the manila folder I had kept carefully tucked away in my home office. Inside were 6 months of meticulously gathered documentation. I had collected photographs, credit card statements, and unexplained hotel charges in cities where Eric had no legitimate business being. There was also a comprehensive private investigator's report. 2 weeks prior, I had hired a licensed private investigator after Eric returned from another supposed business conference with a suspicious sunburn and a hotel key card still in his jacket pocket. The investigator's report was thorough and damning. It included photographs of Eric with a 27-year-old woman named Chloe Daniels, who worked as a bartender and part-time yoga instructor. There were receipts for romantic weekend getaways and video footage of them together at a rooftop bar in Phoenix. I handed all of this evidence to my attorney, Linda Carrington, at our scheduled morning meeting. She flipped through the comprehensive file slowly, a knowing half-smile spreading across her face. "You know," she said, "it's extremely rare for someone to show up this thoroughly prepared. He essentially gift-wrapped this entire case for us." I nodded calmly. I wasn't seeking revenge or vindication. I was seeking protection and justice. Linda carefully examined the transfer logs from our joint account. Eric had been systematically siphoning small amounts over time, just a few $100s here, 1,000 there, carefully calculated amounts that wouldn't raise immediate red flags. But over the course of 6 months, it totaled nearly $15,000, and all of it had been moved into a private account under his name alone. Between the documented affair, systematic financial deceit, and attempted bank fraud, Linda said, closing the folder with finality, we have more than enough evidence to file for divorce with cause and push for a complete asset freeze on his side. I exhaled slowly, not from relief, but from a sense of complete readiness. Eric thought he was making a clean break and starting fresh. What he didn't realize was that I had already emotionally and legally broken away from him months ago. By Monday morning, events accelerated far beyond even my carefully laid expectations. At exactly 9:40 a.m., just before I could finish my second cup of coffee at my office, my supervisor knocked on my door with an unusual expression. "Rachel," he said, lowering his voice to a whisper, "there are 2 people in the lobby asking to speak with you. They're from federal banking enforcement." I stood slowly, maintaining complete composure on the outside while my heart remained steady and focused. "Please send them in." 2 agents entered my office. Agent Silva was a woman in her 40s, sharp and professional but not unkind. Agent Donnelly appeared fresh out of Quantico, young, clean-cut, and extremely serious about his work. "Miss Monroe," Agent Silva said, settling into the chair across from my desk, "we're currently investigating suspicious activity involving federally protected inheritance accounts. We have reason to believe your husband attempted unauthorized access to these funds." I nodded calmly. That's absolutely correct. He called me last week claiming to have successfully moved the money into his name. Donnelly was taking detailed notes while Silva continued her questioning. Have you been aware of any prior attempts to access these protected funds? Not directly, but I was informed this morning that he's been calling Morgan Gray for several months, posing as my financial advisor and requesting sensitive account information. Agent Silva raised an eyebrow significantly. That establishes clear premeditation. This isn't just a marital dispute, Miss Monroe. This is federal fraud with serious implications. What kind of legal consequences are we talking about? Bank fraud can carry up to 20 years in federal prison, Agent Donnelly answered, especially when there's evidence of identity misrepresentation, attempted asset theft, and deliberate use of false information. And your trust is registered under multiple federal protection statutes? I sat completely still, not surprised by this information, just affirmed in my decision-making process. He also used our joint accounts to systematically fund an extramarital affair. A private investigator documented everything thoroughly. Agent Silva's eyes narrowed with interest. You've been strategically preparing for this confrontation? Yes, I said simply and directly. They handed me their business card and requested digital copies of all evidence I had gathered. The financial institution had already submitted its comprehensive report, and they would be reviewing all communications and transaction records. It was highly likely that Mr. Monroe would be contacted very soon. Soon came much faster than anyone expected. That evening, my phone rang insistently. Rachel, please, you have to listen to me. They called me. There are federal agents asking serious questions. You have to help me fix this situation. There's absolutely nothing to fix, I replied with complete clarity. You planned this entire scheme. You executed it deliberately. And now you're dealing with the inevitable consequences. I made a terrible mistake. We can work this out between us. No, you made calculated choices, and I made mine. Goodbye, Eric. I hung up without hesitation. No anger, no bitterness. Just absolute clarity. He thought betrayal would come without any real cost, but he was about to learn just how expensive his actions could be. 3 days after that final conversation, I received a quiet message from Agent Silva. Just wanted to let you know that your husband has been taken into federal custody. I was at home preparing dinner. Nothing elaborate, just grilled salmon and roasted vegetables. I paused, set down my wooden spoon, and asked where the arrest had occurred. Phoenix. He was attempting to board a flight to Costa Rica with his companion when airport security flagged him. Attempting to flee the country while under federal investigation tends to accelerate the entire process significantly. Her tone was professional and even, but I could detect the satisfaction beneath it. Later that night, Chloe, his girlfriend, texted me from an unknown number. Her first message was filled with rage. You completely ruined his life. You're nothing but a bitter, vindictive witch. The second message arrived an hour later. Please, he doesn't deserve this kind of treatment. Can't you help him somehow? I deleted both messages without responding to either one. The following morning, a courier delivered a thick envelope to my front door. The documents were from Morgan Gray, and Patricia Wells had included a handwritten note. All security protocols have been completely reset. Your inheritance remains fully protected and continues to accrue steady interest. Your uncle would be extremely proud of how you handled this situation. I smiled with genuine satisfaction. 6 weeks later, I stood before Judge Harris in King County Superior Court as my divorce was officially finalized. Eric appeared via video link from a federal detention center, looking nothing like the confident man who once bragged about his business acumen and deal-making abilities. He had sunken eyes, was unshaven, and looked completely exhausted. His court-appointed attorney didn't even bother to contest any of the charges or evidence. The documentation was simply overwhelming and irrefutable. The judge spoke clearly and definitively for the official record. Due to the respondent's deliberate attempt to commit financial fraud and identity theft, all claims to shared marital assets are hereby revoked. The house, retirement accounts, trust assets, and all other legal holdings remain solely with the petitioner. I walked out of that courtroom feeling lighter than I had in years. Eric got exactly what he had been chasing all along: freedom. Only now it came with a federal prison sentence, a completely destroyed reputation, and a lifelong debt to the federal government. My phone buzzed as I stepped outside into the fresh air. A message from my sister Claire. Saw the news coverage. 28 months. Are you okay? I replied immediately, better than okay, because I genuinely was. For the first time in decades, I wasn't covering for anyone's mistakes, protecting someone else's fragile ego, or waiting anxiously for the next inevitable failure. I was simply and completely free. A week after the court hearing, I met with Patricia Wells one final time at the Morgan Gray offices. It wasn't just to review investment performance, it was for something far more personal and meaningful. Your uncle left this specifically for you, she said, sliding a sealed envelope across the polished desk, to be delivered only after all legal matters were completely resolved. My hands trembled slightly as I carefully opened it. Inside was a single sheet of cream-colored stationery, his handwriting still neat and deliberate despite his age. Rachel, if you're reading this letter, it means someone attempted to take what wasn't rightfully theirs. I hope my preparations helped shield you from harm. But always remember, the greatest wealth is never in money. It's in peace of mind and personal security. Use what remains to build something beautiful and meaningful. I folded the letter carefully, tears stinging the corners of my eyes, but they weren't tears of sadness or loss. They were tears of profound gratitude. I didn't just survive Eric's betrayal and theft. I learned invaluable lessons from it. I was no longer the woman who stayed silent in the background, who cleaned up other people's messes without recognition. I was someone who had successfully protected what was rightfully mine, who had outsmarted a calculated betrayal, and who was now standing confidently in the full light of her own power and capability. 6 months later, I sold the Vermont cabin and used the proceeds to open my own boutique accounting firm. I specialized in helping women rebuild their financial lives after experiencing financial abuse and betrayal. I named it Monroe Clark, a quiet tribute to the life I had left behind and the woman who had helped me protect what mattered most. Eric's chapter in my life is permanently closed, but mine is wide open and full of possibilities. So to anyone listening to this story, if you've ever been underestimated, betrayed, or deliberately made to feel small and powerless, don't just survive the experience. Prepare strategically, act decisively, and rise above it completely. Because genuine strength doesn't always look like shouting or dramatic confrontation. Sometimes it looks like a calm woman sipping coffee peacefully as the storm breaks around her, remaining completely unshaken and in control.